going on, you fuckers? This is your commissioner, Coach Pintado here. Commissioner Pintado, Coach Pintado, however you want to say it. We are getting closer to the fantasy season. We are 2 weeks away from our 9th annual fantasy football draft here. If you haven't caught up on your fantasy, better do so. Maybe check out the fantasy coaches. I figured as a commissioner, I'd try to do some more things to make you guys more excited for this coming season here. So I figured to do a recap hype video for the upcoming season so you guys get your little wee-wees all excited. So here we go. All right, we start with the current 2021 champion, Nicholas Gabriel. In his seasons, he's got 31 wins, 22 losses, and his one championship in the 2021 season. He also goes by Zaddy as well at times. After going 1-2 to start last year, he would go to finish at 9-2 over the final 11 games, led by Najee Harris in the combined tower of Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams. He would go on to dominate in the playoffs, winning both of his games by over 30 points. Now, last year was Gabriel's first ever win in the league, and hopes to be the first one ever to win it back-to-back. On to our runner-up, Ja'Ron Curtis. Ja'Ron Curtis has 30 wins and 23 losses over the last 3 years, and won championship back in 2017. He also goes by Jibby Marley. Last year, Coach Jibbs, as I call him at times, went 7-1 over the final 8 games, led by Jonathan Taylor and Justin Jefferson. He would go on to escape a narrow round 1 victory, and in round 2, he would crush his opponent, making his next of many final appearances has over his career. He would go on to unfortunately fall apart in the finals with a bad showing and would lose by over 30 fantasy points. But he would get past that number 3 overall finish, so that is always a great news. Coach Ja'Ron wants to get back to the finals this year and hopes to finally get another championship under his belt and be the second person to win 2 now. On to your commissioner, Mr. Steve Pintado here. I have 30 wins and 23 losses over the last 3 years. My one championship back in 2014 in our inaugural season here that we finally actually kept score. Last year, I had a very up and down season. After some early on success, I had some great work with Jalen Hurts and Jamar Chase last year. And I would go on to destroy future other person Matthew Monty in round 1. But unfortunately, that firepower wasn't enough, as I would go on to lose to the eventual champ. But I was one of the only other teams outside of the champ to score over 110 fantasy points during the playoffs. Would go on to win 3rd place, hoping to get back to some glory, as it's been quite a while since I've been called champion. On to our next person, Mr. David Roby, the McNabb of fantasy football. Sorry, Dave. He has 30 wins and 23 losses in 3 years, but has not won a championship yet under this regime. After he would go to the finals in 2020 and start strong in 2021, led by Austin Eckler and Tyreek Hill. Unfortunately, after a round 1 bye in the semifinals, he would only be able to score 70 fantasy points and lose pretty badly in his semifinal matchup here. Dave Roby hopes to rebound from that shaky loss and hopefully finally claim his first championship. Next up is Matthew Monty, the Jacked One, as many of himself calls himself that. Mr. Monty has 25 wins and 28 losses over the last 3 seasons, with one championship just about 3 years ago now. Over the season, Matt Monty would start 5-0 with the helps of Tom Brady and James Conner, but would fall apart on a 2-7 record down the final 9 games. He would still make the playoffs, but get destroyed by yours truly in round 1. Matthew Monty hopes to get back to that underdog life he had in 2019, where he won his first ever championship. Hopefully he can kind of rebound from that. Next up, we have Mr. Jason Tello, our only 2-time champion. Look at that face. He's ready to win a 3rd. Mr. Pella has 29 wins and 24 losses over the last 3 seasons, with 2 championships from 2015 and 2020. Last season, the former champ had a pretty up and down year with Josh Allen and Joe Mixon. Would unfortunately lose round 1 in a nail-biter to Mr. Curtis. Had he won, he would have likely went on to get to the finals at least. But Mr. Pella has a lot riding, as he really wants to win that 3rd championship and be the only person to say that they've won 3 championships. On to our next person. We have Mr. Borghese here. Mr. James Borghese, the old man, as many call him that. He has 22 wins and 31 losses over the last 3 years and has his one championship from the 2018 season. Last season didn't go as planned for him, as he started off decently with Mark Andrews and CeeDee Lamb, but would go on to lose 2 of 4 down the final 6 games and unfortunately missed the playoffs. The once strong contender has failed to make the playoffs each of the last 3 years due to his excuse of saying that the NFL is bitches now, as he says. So he has yet to be informed that it's still fantasy football and we still play for money. So keep losing, Mr. Borghese, but if you want, maybe this is your year to bounce back into contender status here. On to the next one, CJ Haynes, our host of the 2022 draft. Mr. Haynes has 27 wins, 26 losses, and 1 championship in the 2016 season. Mr. Haynes would finish strong with the final 3 games with wins, with Kyler Murray and Hunter Renfrow on his arsenal, but that mid-season stretch of 5 games losing couldn't recover from, and fortunately missed the playoffs. Over the last 3 years, Mr. Haynes has not won a playoff game, unfortunately, but he hopes to get back to some glory that he had early on in our franchise league, as he was a strong contender for championships very early. Over to our next one, Mr. Chris Raguseo, a.k.a. Goose, the Dallas Cowboys of 1999 to 2021. Goose has 22 wins and 31 losses over the last 3 seasons, and unfortunately has yet to win a championship in our league here. An up-and-down season with Stephon Diggs, and for some reason both having 2 Cowboys on his team in Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott, hopes to make it back in the playoffs for that small market team this coming season here, as he has only made it to the playoffs once for the last 3 seasons, hopes to get back to that 2020 glory. And finally, our last person in the league last year, Mr. Lou Amoruso, man who says back-to-back quarterbacks in early rounds is no joke. He has 19 wins and 34 losses in the last 3 years. Unfortunately, not a single championship to his name yet here. With just 1 win last year with very uneven play from Patrick Mahomes and Alvin Kamara, Lou hopes to rid of that terrible 21 season and hopes to get back to competitive nature in 2022. The 2022 season is going to be very interesting, as we have gone through many years of the last 2 seasons of COVID. And hopefully, COVID doesn't bother us for this 2022 season and we can play fantasy football the right way once again here. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this little recap hype video that I've made here for you guys today. And as always, please tip your commissioner at the end of every season here. Thank you so much. Let's have a football, guys.